Oh my god. Yeah, David. Yeah, Dizzy. Oh man, how fun. God. Wow. My guest today, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Amram. He was the penny whistle guy. That was penny whistle, right?
Yeah, that was it. And the person that looks like my grandson, that was me in 1986 or 87, playing, having the
Little
good
guy.
fortune of playing
Yeah,
with him.
man. You were quite young, right?
Well, I was already a middle-aged person by then. I'll be 90 in November 17th. So, but I met him
Man.
in 1951 when I was just before I turned 21 years old. So it's a big thrill to have been invited to play with him at that concert for Monk to celebrate Thelonious Monk and also to have known him up until he passed away. He was just an extraordinary person and a great influence and a great mentor and loved to share music with anybody and everybody. And so
You're
many
you're talking about Dizzy, right?
Dizzy, yeah,
Yeah.
and Charlie Parker, whose birthday was yesterday. I met him
Yeah.
a year later. And just those two people, plus the great Greek conductor Metropolis, Dimitri Metropolis, who conducted the New York Philharmonic and loved jazz, my whole life was already formed as to what I felt touched my heart and where I might be able to extend my efforts in life to try to do something besides stay at home and complain.
It's funny because I was talking with my girlfriend and I was talking about, this is something like 136. This is the 136th day that I've done this. And she was saying, which ones do you really like? And I was saying, when I get to talk to people who not only say what they've done, but they give a perspective on it, it changed my life, or this is why, and who inspired me. It turns me on a lot. I can just by what you said, I can just imagine you must have been excited out of your mind during that time.
Oh, well, I was all of my life really when I was a little kid being brought up on a farm, Feasterville, Pennsylvania. I used to hear the radio, and there was only AM radio back during the Great Depression. And you could hear the Philadelphia Orchestra and the New York Philharmonic, and you could hear folk music, and you could hear the great big bands, jazz, and all of these musics. I thought, boy, I'd like to get close to some of that. So my father said, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, well, I want to be a farmer too, because I was living on a farm and milking cows and doing all that stuff. And he said, no, he said, that's impossible. We all have to have second jobs. That's hopeless. What else? And I said, I'd like to be a classical composer and a jazz musician. And he said, quote, that's even worse. So I had no place to go but up. And fortunately, my uncle, who was a merchant seaman, took me, who used to sail out of the port of New Orleans, took me to hear the Philadelphia Orchestra with Leopold Stokowski conducting. And I said, wow, I saw Peter and the Wolf. I said, I got to get into that. And then he took me to hear Duke Ellington at the Earl Theater in 1941. And I saw Duke's band. And he said, well, because of the way the social conditions are, Duke Ellington had to form his own orchestra. And it's called the Duke Ellington Band. And I saw that. And those things I still think about every day. And that's what got me, without even knowing it, in what would have, until recently, was considered a total non-career, non-path towards anything except Nowheresville. And fortunately, I followed that path, whatever and anything touched, and still today, as we talk, touches my heart, and tried to get close to that. So when you got in touch with me because of Catherine Bostic, whom I hadn't seen in 22 years, she was so terrific. When we did a tribute to Dizzy Gillespie in the park in New York City way back in the late 90s, after Dizzy had passed away, I thought, boy, and then I saw the wonderful, through the magic of today's cyberspace, was able to see Catherine today playing the piano and singing that great song on the recording that you made possible. I said, boy, serendipity has reminded me of how terrific it is to be in the music field, not forget those who touch your heart,
Yeah.
and try to keep up with what your old friends as well as your new friends are doing. And just seeing her singing and playing the piano and talking to her on the phone, knowing that she's now a composer in Hollywood, did the score for that wonderful Toni Morrison film,
Yeah.
has survived everything and is still got that light, that spirit. That's a wonderful thing. And I say that to you and your viewers, especially those who want to sing, paint, dance, write, or do anything, and they're told by their career counselors, there's no demographics, you're too old, there's no audience, you're wasting your time, give up. Maybe if they can see someone who's about to turn 90, still grateful every day, including being grateful right now talking to you and hearing your wonderful records, maybe they'll figure, well, gee, if the person can have that much fun at that age rather than being a decrepit, nasty, old, competitive, visual freak, maybe in spite of my wise counseling from everybody who's supposed to know everything, maybe I'll give it 2 more years anyway.
I have to interrupt you. I think you need to bring the mic a little closer to you.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll, is this
Oh
better?
yeah, that's way better.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, give you a few hellos from people. Joyce Glasgow from
Yeah,
Seattle.
she just wrote me. I played at her college in 1970, and she wrote a letter saying, "I'm following Cathy Garcia's wonderful show, and I saw you're going to be on it." And I didn't want to embarrass her by giving her a shout out because I'm not even sure where she is. If she's still
She's in
on the
Seattle.
West Coast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's back in Seattle. I know she's. I was at her college 50 years ago, and still stay in touch with her. And one of the joys is, of course, Cathy, is not only meeting young people and opening up the door for them as everybody did for me when I was a younger person, but also staying in touch with your own family and with your old friends, because that's the money in the bank in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Yes. And Scott Whitfield sends his love.
Oh my gosh.
Neil Rosengarten said, I love your Manchurian Candidate score. Made me want to compose for film.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Neil. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your asking me. And since it's your show, you have a constitutional right to say something too. So listen.
Thank you. Well, I'm really curious because when I when I look at just the little face value of what I see on your bio on your page, it's quite encompassing of it's like instead of eating one little bite of the sandwich, you just like ate a whole, 3/4 of the sandwich already. So I'm really interested on how, so okay, so you got excited when you were young, and then what did you do? Did you go off to school somewhere, or how did you go about growing what you were doing? You obviously moved to New York at some point.
Yeah. Well, I was what was and still am what you call an avid scholarship student in the University of Hangoutology. Specifically, I have 7 honorary doctorates for which I'm grateful, proud, and honored. But my real schooling is everyday life, or what they call in the vernacular the University of Hangoutology, which means to be with those who are better than you, that know more than you, and who are willing to share what they know with the tacit understanding that you're going to do the same someday.
Yeah.
And the passing on and the sharing and the egalitarianism is not specific to any one form of music or discipline. All the really terrific, or 99% of the real terrific artists are that way. If they see that you're receptive, respectful, and eager to learn.
Yeah.
So I've been around those people who have taught me how to listen, how to look, how to be patient, and how to try to absorb, and how to say please and thank you in any language, whatever country I'm in, whatever culture I'm in, whatever who I'm with. And that way you can slowly learn. So my whole life has been on the job training. And when I spoke to Quincy Jones last, I remember we met at the Rockland Palace in 1956 when he was still playing trumpet with Dizzy Gillespie and starting to arrange. This was a long time ago. Lou Donaldson invited me, study Stitt, all these monster musicians. And he was playing in the band, and he told me years later, he said, you know, all the things, my first movie score, The Pawnbroker, everything, I just kind of fell into those different things, and I figured out what to do. Steve Martin, the great actor, is a wonderful banjo player. When I played on his recording, he said to me, I never acted, but just being in the films and asking those other actors, they kind of helped me to know what I'm going to do. Elia Kazan, who directed Splendor in the Grass and those films I worked on, told me when he was an actor, James Cagney showed him how to do certain stuff acting where he could turn his head slightly so that they'd be able to see his face and still address the person he was with. All those things, other artists who know more will show you and help you to learn if you are respectful enough to say, please help me, please. Or in music, you got to learn Middle Eastern music or Native American music, Afro-Cuban rhythms, to learn to say, please, can you show me that again? Dando es uno, where is one? Por favor. And can you show me that one more time? Can you show me that again? Is this right? And then you get a basis of what to practice. And then when you finally figure that out, you can hear what other people was doing. I'm listening now to Charlie Parker. Last night, a bunch of people sent me 100th anniversary recordings. And I wrote back one of the people who said, finally, after meeting him in 1952, which is quite a few weeks ago, I can finally hear most of what he's doing.
Oh,
And
wow.
still some stuff I say, what? And I mention that because there is so much beautiful music and so much literature and painting and people and things that are out there. You can spend a lifetime paying attention and trying to learn about them. And that's what makes it so exciting. And that makes it still exciting. So when you get to be my age, instead of being an enraged shuffleboard player and figuring that you're, because of generics, put on the scrap heap, or that you have to imitate a 17-year-old person that you don't know, whatever their fashion statement is jammed down their throat for the week. You have to just to be yourself, but try to keep awake, alert, and learn more, and then share the little bit that you have acquired with other people in the way that those gifts were bestowed upon you. You know all that, but it's good sometimes to take
Well, oh, no, I mean, first of all, my heart is, pounding here because uh, it's what you're talking about. You've lived and you are living, and I mean that is. I'm not alone in my desires. I'm sure a lot of people listening. This is what we desire. We desire to learn and really down and deep and to share and to improve the lives of others. I mean, if this whole concept was really the focus of life, our lives would all be so much better right now. It would be because this is the purpose. This is the purpose. And without a purpose, you're just kind of wandering around from, funny door to funny door. So,
definitely.
yeah, I'm so glad to talk to you about this. And when Catherine suggested that I hook up with you, I'm sure she was she was thinking about that. She was thinking, "Oh boy, this is going to be a good conversation."
Well, I hadn't seen her in so many years, but sometimes someone strikes your heart
Yeah.
and your brain and all that with what they do, and it becomes a recent event. And that's
Yeah.
like nostalgia, because then there's some things that are really a drag, no matter how how much positive you try to be. And you try 13 times, say, I'm going to be very Buddhistic and look for the beauty part that I may be missing. And suddenly your central nervous system says, ugh. Then you figure, well, maybe they're too hip for me or whatever it is. And you just kind of block that out so that your being is not full of other people's negativity. So the beautiful things that you do remember stay with you. So when I heard that she was interested and that you were a friend of hers, I said, wow, that's about the highest recommendation I could get because I know how terrific she was and
Yeah.
still is.
Yeah. Yeah. She's
And
very,
you can't buy that. You can only be lucky enough to be with someone. And if, when we played together all those years ago, she was already like monster talented. But if I had been a disgusting creep, I'm certainly she would have that would have been,
right.
and
That would
she
have,
did
that would have
remember me.
remained too, believe me.
So I always tell people, that your legacy is what you are, what you do, and how you behave every day. So if you're terminally hooked on the American dream of being Mr. Super Swine or
Yeah.
Ms. Swiness, chances are you might be in the pantheon of admirable people in the realm of swinehood, but the chances are you're going to miss out on all the beautiful stuff because you repel those people who would be glad to share something with you when you exhibit those tendencies. So it's almost each day you have to confront your DNA and say, wait a minute, I've seen people like that who are such a drag. They make me feel sick in the stomach. So perhaps if I feel an attack of swinehood coming on, I better repel it. Shakespeare, I remember when I worked Shakespeare in the Park 12 years, one of the hippest things in Hamlet that really struck me was Polonius' speech where he said, assume a virtue if you have it not. In other words, if you see something is beautiful, but you're not sure you can do it, fake it. And you feel better afterwards, and then you continue to do it, and it'll become a virtue.
That's nice. One time I was going through this kind of, spiritual growth about affinity, that affinity melts bad stuff, right? You flow affinity to people
Yeah.
and anyway, so I thought I'd try it out on the freeway. So I was driving and, some asshole was driving by and did some stupid thing. And I thought, I really got into it and I thought, wow. And I didn't try and pretend he wasn't doing it. I said, you are so good at being an asshole. Wow, I really admire you. And then all of my bad feeling went away, and
Mm.
who knows if it affected him too, but for me, it was great. So it's it's great when you can take responsibility and see clearly enough to actually do something like you were just saying. I choose to, do something good or feel something good, and and I bet you saw that a lot. I want to say in the bebop, coming up in the bebop, because there were so many challenges during that time for the musicians, right?
Well, there were challenges for everybody,
Yeah.
everybody. And meeting Bird and Dizzy and then going in the army and traveling all over Europe and then coming to New York City. The third week, Leonard Feather, who'd written me up in Downbeat magazine because he saw me playing at a bar in Germany playing the French horn. And I came back and I met Gunther Schuller, who also heard me in a bar playing the horn and said, you should come to New York and study. He was then teaching French horn at Manhattan School of Music.
Oh, huh.
So I came back, I had the GI Bill, came back with a student band. And that was a fluke because the student band came into the place I was playing in Paris and said, come on, but you could be in our band. I said, man, I'm already 24 years old. I'm too old to pretend to be a college student. They said, no, you can just be in the band. So I got a lift on the Grootbier, came to New York City, and 3 weeks later, I was invited to Leonard Feather's house at this amazing party.
Huh.
Dick Hyman was playing piano, and now I'll be doing a concert with him 60 some years later in Florida playing for the first time. Anyway, Those are all things that just happened. So I went with Leonard. Bud Powell was playing, and his bass player was standing in front of the trio leading everything. That was Charles Mingus. And he came over to the table, and Leonard Feather said, "This is Dave Amram. He's a wonderful young kid, just came from Paris. He plays jazz French horn." And Mingus gave me a deep stare and said, "Will you go on the road with me for $125 a week?" If I said yes, he probably would have punched me in the mouth. But I said, "Gee, Mr. Mingus, I'd be honored, but I'm at Manhattan School of Music on the GI Bill studying composition and orchestration." And he said, "You'll learn more with me than you ever will in school." And he was right. So I was lucky enough to, just by a fluke, which is everything else in my life, and still is, meeting you and being here today. I played, and it was just such a great chance to be with musicians who were way over my head and be in their company and meet Thelonious Monk, became a lifetime friend of him, and his son T.S., who was then 5 years old, is now in his 60s, a killer drummer, educator, everything that he does with the Monk Foundation and his own band. All these wonderful things just happened really kind of by serendipity, and having the chance to do something beautiful for no apparent reason except that I was lucky enough to be asked or indicated to share it. And that's a lot different than going door to door or going to parties and hustling and slobbering and networking and all that stuff. And it takes longer, but then I think if you're lucky enough, you can really develop that University of Hangoutology way, which means to be open to everybody, not for career opportunities, but just to stay alive and be part of the world and learn something, because everybody's got a story and everyone can teach you something. And conversely, to share those few blessings that you have with other people.
Yeah.
And that's not some Zen freakatissimo, let's all drop acid and say whatever.
Yeah.
That's the New Age Burger Kingization of ancient religions, putrefying the atmosphere by adding fake, you know, spirituality for sale, like those
Yeah.
things you see on the YouTube of how to cure this and that. You say, "Hey, that's pretty good," and then you see the part that says, "Click on this link," and then there's a big lecture, and then at the end they're trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
Then you take what they're trying to sell and put it on Google and put the word scam, and you find out that half the time it's worthless. So
Hey,
but
so
there's
so
stuff that is worthwhile, and that
yeah,
has to go in.
absolutely. And so curious, did you go to school or did you go with Mingus?
No, I stayed in school, and then Mingus was right. I got so busy playing with him and starting to write music for Shakespeare in the Park, which wasn't even in the park. It was just beginning, and writing music for other things, that I almost completed a year, and that was it. But I learned so much from Ludmila Ulela, who was a wonderful music theory teacher, and Vittorio Giannini, who was a wonderful composer, composition. And then I studied with someone named Charles Mills, whom I took 7 lessons from, who could sit on a card table and write out a whole symphony
Oh,
score with a pen and ink out of his head. He didn't even use a piano,
oh,
and learn enough basic stuff so that I could spend the rest of my life learning how to be a composer. And I'm still learning stuff about that every day. And that's what makes it exciting. I just finished a piece for the Harvard Wind Symphony called Global Suite for Winds, Brass, and Percussion. They were going to play it this December, but because of the virus, they had to postpone it. But I couldn't even get into Harvard, and I was so thrilled to have them commission me to write a piece. And they did the first movement just sort of as a trial, and it was the high IQ orchestra. They were all going to be doctors, lawyers, statesmen, bankers. So I think there was one music major, but those kids could play up a storm. And I said to them, just see what's on the paper, and then the music will tell you what to do. And when I did The Manchurian Candidate, John Frankenheimer said, watch the film, and the film will tell you what to do. So I saw as a composer, you can't be clear enough. And every tiny little thing, I try to get every detail written down on paper so that the people who are playing won't say, I wonder what he or she meant by that. And then if they can take that off the paper and play it and then feel something, then they're putting their feeling into their creativity into it. And then everybody does that together. And that's what music is.
I'm curious, could you say what you're learning now? I mean, you said you're still learning about composing. What
Oh,
what
yeah.
would you be learning?
Well, I'm learning how to make it shorter, clearer, and not have 17 pieces in one piece. And Stravinsky had a famous comment. He was hearing works of composers. He said that composer, that young composer was brilliant, but his piece ended way after it was over. In other words, keep it clear, precise, well structured, and don't be ashamed perhaps to sit and play the same chord 37 times so you're certain that you have the correct voicings and the correct feeling, because ultimately it's that guides the listener, the conductor, the singer, the player into doing something themselves. So structure is so important. And at the same time, improvising, which I do is when I play jazz or improvising words, that gives you a certain something. And that feeling inside you from a lifetime of doing that enables you to edit what you're doing to say, does that feel like it's saying something? And a wonderful person in the print shop up here that I go to get stuff copied said, my grandmother never finished school. She said, I went to NYU and studied. She said, we watched movies together, and my grandmother would say, darling, that film's amazing, but it ain't saying nothing. And ultimately, Lester Young, when he had someone come and play the Flight of the Bumblebee, Bach's greatest hits in the bombing of Hiroshima, uh, as he always did, sat very elegant, quiet, and gracious, diplomatic. And he said, that was most impressive. He said, now I'd like to hear your story. And I think that's so much of what it's about, to be able to tell your story, not to copy just what someone else already did. And you're always told that by various trendsetters and experts of what's supposed to be this week's hip way of doing things. But the reality is everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own family, their own heritage, their own experiences, their own sensibilities, and they're all interesting. And I think that literature, music, theater, art, just about anything is storytelling and picture painting. And you have to do that with what I call in music a purity of intent and an exquisite choice of notes. And in literature, purity of intent and an exquisite choice of words. And in the theater, purity of intent and an exquisite choice of what you do at that moment. And remember Charlie Parker's statement, now's the time, to always remember the sanctity of the now. So with all that stuff, that can give you a good start each and every day to see if you can clean up your act and do better.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, it's always okay. That's
And
that's
if I could
great.
follow my own advice, I'd be a bad cat.
Of course. Well, I have this amusing amusement to myself. Like, the guitar community in LA is very intense. The jazz guitar community,
Oh, yeah.
and it just always amuses me. No matter how many years a guitar player has been playing, you always see when you go out on a gig, you see these guys get together and go, look at the voicing I just found.
Oh, boy.
And I'm always like, really? You've been playing for like 60 years and you just found a new voicing? That's pretty amazing, especially for guitar players, because guitar players are so, they live in that guitar land,
Oh,
for hours and hours every day.
when I was in Brazil in 1969, we were sitting at these different places. I was there, fortunately, working, doing a whole bunch of programs, and people would come from table to table with their guitars and say, "Look, man," and then they'd show some fantastic. I don't know how. I didn't see one capo in Brazil. Everybody played, classical guitar style. Look, man, and they play some chord. And when I met Joe Beam in New York City in 1965, before his famous concert, he not only played piano all night, he was playing guitar. That was a George Plimpton
Wow.
soiree where I was the party piano player. So I was able to thump along with him. And then he started playing the guitar. I said, "Holy God," pardon my language, God. I never heard any or never saw any guitar player playing. He did that too. And in Brazil, that happens all the time. And when I played with Vic Juris, whom I met in 1970, I guess,
Beautiful.
we played up until about 2 weeks before he passed away. And the last time or two we played, he was doing some stuff. I was saying, "What? I've never heard him do that before."
Huh.
His wife, who's a wonderful Kate,
Oh,
who's
she's
a great
lovely.
singer, and
Yeah.
she said, Vic, he keeps finding new stuff all the time.
He's a gorgeous player.
And there's so many wonderful, wonderful guitar players. And I remember the beautiful guitar player whose son John now has taken over his dad's heritage. And
Oh, yeah.
and when I was playing at a place called the Cafe Lena up in Saratoga Springs, and
Uh-huh.
which was really fun. So there were no jazz gigs in the 70s. I just went up there and played at a folk place. And a young fellow said, "Man, I want to come down." Lena said, "I'd like to come down and see if we could get him to play at my cafe." And I said, "Well, God, he plays studios and he played with Betty Goodman and he's like a famous guitar player." So we went down and he came over to the table and she said in her inimitable way, "I'm Lena Spencer of the Cafe Lena. Would you play at the cafe?" And she was so far out. He said, "Well, if I'm up there, I will." And sure enough, he came up. But the kid who was with him played three chords. And he said, "I see you got your guitar. You play guitar?" And he said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, let me hear you." So this was during intermission. He took out his guitar and he said, "Well, let me show you something. You're playing that A. Let me show you how to play an A seventh and then how to do it in a bar position." He gave him a guitar lesson. And he said, "All us guitar players, that we're all got that worldwide community and we're kind of friendly with each other." And I thought that was terrific. A lot of guitar players and bass players I knew were that way. And then I found out all the great jazz players that I was blessed to bump shoulders and even play with, Kenny Durham, whom I met when he played with Bird and other people, they could all play the piano too. And Dizzy played slow motion piano, but boy, those chords that he hit. And I said one time, I said, "Diz, the way your voicings, what stuff you can find." And he said, "Man, I'm a harmony freak." So when I listened to that beautiful Birth of the Cool record in 1950, came out in 59, and I was trying to compose, I said, "Well, I love Arnold Schoenberg, Webern, and Berg, but they already did that. They've got that sewed up." And they were reacting to the 150-piece orchestras with pieces that went on for an hour. They said, "We're going to clean up the act and start all over again." I think the last thing they wanted was to have everybody in every university copy them and eliminate the rest of the history. So when I heard that, and I heard those beautiful, what Diz would call harmony freak, beautiful voicings and counterpoint and species counterpoint with those wonderful harmonies where every note felt like it was a winner and it's just so beautiful. I said, "Man, this is a different way to approach music than just what you are told that's all there is or else." So when I came to New York, I tried to go to hear in the Achtung, you Schwein circles of what's supposed to be acceptable. This was in the 1950s. And I enjoyed all that, so it was really brilliant. but I gravitated towards trying to find something of my own heritage or heritages and my own experiences, and I'm still using that. One of the pieces I have, and I just wrote the second movement of my global suite, I used the old Appalachian melody playing the Chinese huluse, which is a instrument. Nobody's going to know this when they hear the piece because it's written for winds, brass, and percussion. And I think it's going to sound pretty good. But I got the idea from this instrument, which I got when I was in Chengdu, China at a Beat Meets East conference. And I heard people playing. So I used that as part of an introduction to a version I do of Woody Guthrie's wonderful Pastures of Plenty, which is on my YouTube site. On the website, you can check out selected YouTubers. And I did that for E-Town on the show I did with Steve Earle. But I thought I would somehow take sorry. And from that, I used that and I played at Woody Fest and played that and just wrote some interesting harmonies. Then I said, man, I'm going to use that in a piece. So I ended up using it. And when it finally gets played, no one has to know about that. But that's how that experience evolved into becoming something that I used in the symphony. And I put in the program notes the name of the piece and where it was from, so I wasn't stealing it. It's not that hard. It's not that hard to say thank you. So anytime in a score that you use anything, you can say who taught it to you, where it was from,
Yeah.
and then what you do with it is and that was the only thing in the piece that I used, except the last movement was based on music I did for a ballet called Chakra, and I used one piece that was taught to me when I was in Pakistan, and I put down the name from 1978 of what that was and who taught it. And a lot of the stuff, of course, I don't do anything like that, but if I do, I always use a thank you if it's due. And the copyright law says it's public domain, but the law of decency is if you get a gift,
Yeah.
you thank the person who gave it to you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That sound is really very tied into your heart. And I just wanted to say a comment on here from a man who I haven't been in touch with that much now, but when I was younger in LA, he was like my jazz father, Lauren Pickford.
Oh,
Yeah, and he said, here's what Lauren says. I had the honor of playing with David at a dinner in New Orleans before his concert. We played something he wrote in honor of Bird, Dizzy, and Jack Kerouac. Myself, Wendell Brunius, and Norm, a news anchor covering the Kerouac. David had on a tuxedo, his flutes galore, bare feet, and a big bunch of necklaces, beads, and gris around his neck. It was the first time I ever got to play with strings, bass, clarinet, etc. I turned around and asked the string people, "Hey, do you know Just Friends?" It was a great experience.
you know what was that?
Hey, do you know Just Friends?
Oh,
I guess. Yeah, Lauren is a very special human being too, and he was a big, like you were saying before, you know how sometimes people make a huge huge impression on you. Lauren definitely
you
made
send
it.
him my best if you see him.
Well, you're sending him your best right now because he's listening.
Oh, well, Lawrence, I'm learning best friend, so if I come down to Norway, capital N apostrophe AWLINS, the way they say it, Nolans. I hope we can play together, and I'll try to get the chord changes for Just Friends and not mess it up. And if you can't get some string players, I'll play on whatever keyboard you have and try to sound like strings.
He also is a multi instrumentalist. He's especially piano and sax, but I'm sure more things than that. My friend Roland asked, "Do you play the sheng?" I don't know what that is. It sounds like a Chinese instrument.
No, there's a whole bunch of ones that I saw there, which are incredible, but they I realized I'd have to take off 20 or 30 years to learn how to play them properly. And somehow the hulose, as it's called, this one is wonderful to play. And basically
Sounds
all you have to
great.
do is exhale, and it all comes out. And
Is it at all like the French horn or?
sure, no, no, it's different. So if you're playing jazz or anything, you go, you could do all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Just as you were singing, you can do all the vocal sounds. That's not that difficult. Other instruments is so difficult even to get to play a scale or do anything. You have to spend about 5 years before you can even sound like a good 6-year-old player. So I still play the horn. I'm making my comeback number 264,000. It's sitting back there. Dizzy told me, he said, every morning, Dave, he said, that trumpet's sitting in the case waiting for me. So that's a constant challenge. And I developed the keyboard during the 14 years I played at the Cornelia Street Cafe till the high rents finally made them fold. I had the chance, because there wasn't enough of a budget to get a big band or anything close to that, to play piano myself. And I actually developed my jazz playing on the piano past the point of being able to play chord changes behind people, which I love to do, and actually learn a little bit about the keyboard. And Monk was the one who told me way back, he said, man, he said, work on your piano playing. He said, because with the piano, you can not only hear it, you can see it. And unfortunately, I'd never been taught that in school because they assumed if you're a composer and you use the piano, you're cheating. So for any of you viewers out there who play guitar or piano or anything, as long as the music comes out being beautiful and correct, it doesn't matter how you get to it. And my teacher, Charles Mills, who wrote on a pianoless room with a card table, pen and ink, and didn't even make a sketch and wrote out a whole symphony out of his head. He said, I can do that. But he said, Brahms used the piano all the time. Stravinsky used the piano all the time. And in the big band in Washington, D.C., Joe Timer, and it was with Joe's wife that I met Charlie Parker. Joe himself, when he was composing, and Gil Evans, when he was composing, they'd sit there and bang away for hours to get one chord right, and then they'd write it down. And Stravinsky himself said in his Poetics that sometimes he would play one chord 14 times to make sure that it was correct, that it was the voicings were correct for whatever he was orchestrating it for. So any way that you can do it is good. And the idea of being able to see as well as hear the piano is a big help for music theory. My daughter now is actually going to music school, and she was a natural. All three of my kids just grew up playing everything in the house with anybody that dropped by. And now she's a wonderful singer-songwriter, but now she's studying music theory formally and understanding what she's been playing. And that opens up the door for her. She told me just last night on the phone, Alana, that this is helping her in terms of her composing new songs by having theoretical grasp, like a box of tools. So whenever you get stuck, then you can use all that theoretical knowledge to help you to get out of that trap and find out what's the right thing. But ultimately, you have to do it on feeling, I believe. And your feeling is a result of everything you've experienced in life that's in your DNA of all those experiences. So if you're surrounded by beauty, chances are you'll be able to find something beautiful in what you do. And
Love.
there's no formula for that, no television commercial where no instant 30-second, you too could be groovy, beautiful, and spiritual if you give me $8,000 and there's no magical thing. That's a lifetime of experience, and half the time, or maybe 90% of the time, those beautiful things are right in front of you, but they're not considered by those who are supposed to be authorities to be worthy.
Yeah.
So forget about what you're told is who is important, who's worthy, and who sucks, and don't think of it in those terms, but just to look for what touches your heart.
Yeah. I want to kind of jump into something a little different. I'm curious to know because you're still obviously very busy, and and maybe this isn't maybe this includes an earlier time in your life and now, but how do you organize your time? You must have more than one thing that seems to be a priority.
Well, right now I have a whole bunch of priorities. So each day is a daily struggle. And my priority today was to be sure when I was on your program not to look like I was ready to go to the insane asylum and be able to go,
Well, you
or
do
or
achieve
make
that because you don't look like you're ready to go to the
or make your
insane
make
asylum.
your viewers so bored that they would turn it off and say, "I think I'm going to watch the network news or something." Really
I don't think
ridiculous.
they're bored either.
So but what I have to do immediately, I'm starting a year-long Zoom program of my own. And this again was serendipity bump, just as I was fortunate enough to have Catherine recommend you get in touch with me, and here we are. Someone read my book, Offbeat, collaborating with Kerouac, who had seen me when I was at Beyond Baroque in Los Angeles and at the Zebulon when I played there. And she loved the book so much and said, I've loved Jack Kerouac and all this negative stuff I read about him. She said, your book, why isn't that a word book or an audio book? I said, well, it never sold that many copies and blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, I think we should do a program and have you read the book. And I said, well, how are we going to do that? So now she and a young fellow, Anthony, and I can't pronounce his last name correctly, 32-year-old, brilliant technician and musician, and he's done everything. And he's doing real well in California, but he'd like to work on something that he considers would be worthy. And the two of them are arranging September 20th. I start a whole year of reading from my book, Offbeat, collaborating with Kerouac. And then we're going to do my first book, Vibrations, and then my final book, Offbeat, collaborating with Kerouac. And my new book I'm writing called Amram at 90 is going to be done by that time. I've done the other all three books, and that could be the fourth book. And I wrote the woman and said, this way, it'll probably be 4 years from now before we're done. My grandson, who's 6, when he has grandkids, they'll be able to read about all of us when they go to college because the books, information will be out there, and it will have been spoken and written by the person who was there, who was part of it. So I think that's what we can do, not with the idea of leaving your footprints in the sands of time or building an obelisk or a skyscraper or an office building or the side of Mount Rushmore, but rather something that might be of interest to somebody who would like to know what it was like, to find out from a primary source what their take was about what it was like, with the hope that it will make them feel creative and respect what they've experienced. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. And then the person who made the first film about me, called David Amram, the first 80 years, wants to make a film called Amram at 90. And we're going to have a concert at Newport because the three great festivals, the folk festival, the jazz festival, and the classical festival, which are fabulous events, were all canceled due to the virus. So they've found a venue where they can have people socially distanced and have a free concert where we're going to honor all three of those festivals. And they're going to do two of my own chamber works. And then I'm going to play some jazz classics that were played there, and some folk and global roots classics. And that'll be the whole concert. So I'm working on those two things. And then also starting a new piece for Elmira Daravarova, a great, incredible first woman violinist who ever was the concertmaster of the Met, and a magnificent person and friend whom I've written a lot of music for. So I'm real busy trying to get all those things together, plus a lot of other stuff. So each day I finally drag myself out of bed and say, oh man, I'm almost 90. I'm getting older. I have to bypass that luxury of groaning and feeling sorry for myself, get my carcass into action, and work till 5 in the morning to try to get everything done. So my schedule each day for any normal person, I guess, would be a nightmare. But I still get to see my kids, and I get to talk to them every day, and my grandson, at least on FaceTime, thank heavens. And when Cyrus the virus finally takes the hike, I'll look forward to getting back. And I'm actually haven't played since March 9th. And I'm also trying to get my 15 events here and overseas for my 90th birthday, which is November 17th, trying to help to reschedule those things for next spring or next summer. So that's a long-winded answer.
Yeah. So, and even if you don't mind, just even more specifically, so you wake up in a day and you have, I mean, you obviously have a lot of things going on that are important. So do you schedule your day like, okay, I'm going to do an hour for this and an hour
Yes,
for that, or,
I try to, but then sometimes I get stuck
yeah.
because I want to do each thing right. So if I'm correcting the last movement where I have to put in the super 12th version of dynamics phrasing and make sure everything's right on the beautiful score, which I do, and then get someone to copy it in the old-fashioned way, like a medieval monk that's good enough for C.F. Peters to print, the poor players and the conductors down the line won't have to say, I wonder what he meant by that. And sometimes I'll work a whole day just on 2 pages of that, and then it'll take me hours longer than I thought because I want to be sure
Yeah.
that it's clear. And if I'm writing an email to you or to someone else about something, I want to make sure that it's not slovenly. And that's true with everything, to try to get it right. So that very often takes more time than I would allot. So there's never really enough time to do everything. And in a certain way, that's kind of wonderful. Because I think people that feel that they don't know what to do with their time and then watch too much network television news can get very depressed. So every time that I don't have the news on with someone screaming at me and insulting other people, the one wonderful thing I saw was the Bill Maher show. They interviewed Wynton Marsalis.
Oh,
And
really? Wow.
he was so terrific because he wasn't just talking about himself or his music, which are pretty phenomenal. I did
Yeah.
the very first concert when he was still in Juilliard. He played the Haydn Concerto and a jazz piece and killed them on both levels. He was doing 1979, what I've been trying to do all my life, and he did it and still doing it. And he's getting that idea out there that jazz is classical music and that European classical music is also beautiful, and that both are worthy of respect and recognition, and that music education is something that every country in the world except ours has, and that we could do a lot better. But rather than whining about it, he's constantly doing something about it, in addition to playing up a storm and being a wonderful composer himself, and a trumpet player and a jazz player and a band leader and an ambassador for jazz and an ambassador for a higher level of conduct. That's why he gets a lot of static, because he doesn't fit into the cliche of the professional victim. Because those unfortunately who support different parts of the art, if they're a painter, they have Vincent van Gogh as the classic example, where the highlight of his life was cutting off his ear, and the reality is the highlight of his life were those paintings and those magnificent 136 letters he wrote to his brother Theo. And knowing Charlie Parker, as I did way back, so much of what's done about him reflects his personal problems. And I remember just how magnificent he was and how kind he was to me and all my friends that he took under his wing when he was playing in Washington way back. And sure enough, I heard on YouTube an interview with him with Paul Desmond, and I said, my God, I wasn't just sugarcoating my memories. That's the way I remember him speaking and sounding. He's talked to Paul for about a half an hour. He was brilliant, warm, intelligent, smart, gracious. And then, of course, you hear what he played, and you can understand the connection. General Grant was an alcoholic, and Lincoln was a manic depressive, and Sigmund Freud was a big coke snorter, but we don't remember them for that.
Yeah.
We remember them for what they contributed. And I think Winton's a good example of someone that's really got it together. So a lot of people resent that because he doesn't fit into they think he's not authentic because he's not dead or a drug addict or whatever. And that's understandable. But fortunately, he carries on. And seeing him on the Bill Maher program, he sounded like he should be president. It was just beautiful to see that and to know that there's a lot of people out there that are that way. And Catherine Bosnick, when she plays the piano and sings on that record, thank heavens you were able to get her to do, boy, her mother was a great classical pianist too. And seeing her playing and hearing her singing, and she's got it all covered. And there's a lot of people like that I've seen here and in Europe and in Asia and in Canada and throughout the United States who can do a lot of things well and want to do more well. So the cat is out of the bag, and the grunting gasps of the last dinosaurs of death are now sounding their death rattles, and we're unfortunately having to watch that as they sink into the oblivion they so richly deserve. And I think that the newer era is going to be a lot of younger people who have open minds, open hearts, and open access to things of beauty and relevance and intelligence. And they can go on YouTube and online, go on your show, and they can see and hear and be exposed to stuff that they would never know about otherwise. What you played at the opening of my playing with Dizzy, that's more jazz than you would see on network television in a year. So it's wonderful to have that option. And as long as there's a chance for something of beauty and value to be available, that's going to help to save everything.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, it's going to be there. And you figure, you see that movie Amadeus, and you see the crap, pardon my language, that Mozart had to deal with. We don't remember the crap in the court system. That all went down into the cesspool where it belonged after World War I completely. The Europeans couldn't stand that anymore. But the music, the painting, the theater, the poetry, the literature, the good food, the wine, and the language, that's still there. So the thing, as John Keats said, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. And for all the rest of it, as Woody Guthrie said in his song, so long, it's been good to know you.
Wow, that was quite that was quite the segment. Oh, that was great. Oh. Um, yeah, I'm not, I mean, yeah, you said everything. I don't have to answer that, but I want to continue on. I want to play a little bit of music. And also a friend of mine, we have a few comments, but a friend of mine who's a drummer here, Jim Varley, he met you many years ago in the Village at a bar called the Lion's Head.
Right.
and you were talking with him, and he told you that he really wanted to hear some more of your work. So you went back to your house and you got copies of all your albums and gave them to him.
Wow. I don't, well, the mind blower is now that those albums, I still have a few left. They're, people are actually getting LPs again.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that wild?
Vinyl, vinyl outsold CDs. And I have a whole discography of the wonderful kid I met when he was 14 years old, Kai Hoti. He's now a wonderful songwriter, and he's and a sort of a technical genius in addition to playing guitar and singing and playing and doing a lot of stuff. And we have pictures of all those albums that I played on, and most of them, some of them were made into CDs, and now the CDs are being made back into albums again. So I think, listening to some of the stuff that I completely forgotten about, I remember always being told, that's not commercial. My film scores for The Manchurian Candidate and Splendor in the Grass, which were done 60 years ago and 58 years ago, respectively, wow. I was told over and over again, it don't sound like movie music. I said, it's not movie music, it's music for a movie. They said, well, if you're a film composer, you're supposed to write movie music. I said, I'm not a film composer. I'm a composer who loves films and occasionally gets asked to write the music for them. And if they do, I want what I write to be as good as when I'm writing a symphony. So to make a long story short, I did my best, and I was fortunate to have John Frankenheimer for The Manchurian Candidate just say, the movie will tell you what to do. It's not a Chinese war movie. Just do what you got to do. And he let me do the best I could. And the same is true with Splendor in the Grass and the film Kazan made called The Arrangement and other ones that I've done. And I just did one for Barbara Koppel. And occasionally every year or two or three or four, I'll do a film score, and I love doing it. But I didn't want to decide that I had to change my whole life, although I was tempted. And when I was offered 7 films after The Manchurian Candidate, I said, I can't write that much good music, orchestrate it, conduct it, serve the film, and write some really good music and play in it and do all that stuff and do it a good job. When I mentioned the word good job, I could see it. That made the person want to throw up. It was speaking to me. That was completely out of the question. So the response was, they thought I was some kind of an adolescent jerk with a career death wish. They said, well, what are you going to do now? You're leaving after this film. I said, well, I'm having a town hall concert of my music, and I'm writing a string quartet. And they looked at me. Then they really wanted to vomit, but they were quite gracious enough to let me leave first. And I said, well, it was nothing personal. But if I took that suggestion, I could probably be a millionaire in 1 year, which would be great. Yeah. But I didn't want to have to hire a staff of people to compose my music for me, get a bunch of ghostwriters, and spend all my time hustling for the next gig and get out of the music field. If I wanted to, be a sailor, which I always did because my uncle was a merchant seaman, and take a boat to Catalina every week, and I would use music just as a business, great. But I wanted to do it, and I still want to do it for something that I'm trying to do the best I can.
Yeah.
And hopefully do something of value for others. So I bypassed that idea of being a foreman and hiring other people to do stuff for me. Stravinsky said I was offered $50,000. That was 60 years ago, to do a score, and he said, quote, I won't pad your film with my music. Then they said, well, Mr. Stravinsky, if you'll put your name on it, we'll get someone else to write it, and you can get the 50. And he said, no. I said, well, boy, he's got a lot of heart, and I don't blame him.
Whoa.
And there are very gifted composers who work out there. Alex North was fantastic. But he told me, he said, David, after I did Viva Zapata and those other scores, he said, I was offered symphonies and symphonic bands and all kinds of people wanted me to write pieces. He said I couldn't do it unless it was a film score. I would break the leaves out of my pool, go to my psychiatrist, and then go lie on a couch. I couldn't do it without doing it for a film and a deadline. So I figured, well, sometimes you got to say no. So I admired him saying that. He was a great composer and a great person. And a lot of the other people that I met way, way back said, you know, if you really want to do what you want to do, go ahead and do it. You'll have a better life. So I still live from day to day as I approach 90. And I certainly wouldn't criticize anybody who wants to do what they would call commercial work, because it's good. You know, I have to support 3 kids and I have to support myself. And I have nothing except my French horn, a car, and which I'm still paying off at a good disposition. But my music's getting played all over the world, and I'm getting to write more music, and I have a good time whether I'm playing in the parking lot of the Woody Guthrie Folk Festival in Okima, or prison, or guest conducting at Carnegie Hall. And I still do all 3 of those things and love to do them. And it's a joy to talk to you. And I think it's important in life, if you have a dream, to try to follow that as much as possible, as long as you're not stepping on anybody else or shafting them if they play with and for you by not paying them, because you say, I'm an artist. That doesn't go. You have to wear not both hats. You just have to be decent.
Balanced.
Exactly.
A balanced human. Yeah. I mean, we all have our imbalances, and that's kind of basically our, you know, one of the paths in life that we have to follow. How do I balance? Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter, as you say, it doesn't matter what age you are, because balance is, you know, I mean, it just, you go along until you get it. You realize,
also never to be a winologist or a blameologist
yeah,
and complain about the fact that artists don't get this or that. No one asked any of us to be composers, actors, singers, dancers, or songwriters or whatever. And if we choose to do that, it's because we love it so much we're going to do it anyway. And it's nobody's. So rather than complaining and whining that the government doesn't support the arts, et cetera, we can try to help out to see that for others to get more support than we did. But in the meantime, we can support other people ourselves by at least saying hello to them and encouraging them. That's not a big deal.
yeah,
And not putrefying what's left of the pot by, when we get our chance to express our feelings, spewing out a lot of whining and blaming.
yeah.
Because you're supposed to do that, I guess, for psychiatrists. And they get paid $300 an hour and send their kids to college that way from hearing people's troubles, and make sure you keep coming back indefinitely till their kids graduate from school. However, you can do the same thing by hanging out at a bar or being with friends.
The University of Hangology, right?
All the people that are, you know, driving buses and working in grocery stores and scrubbing buildings and picking our crops, that are out there risking their lives, and so a lot of them are dying because they have to have that gig. They're the ones that could be singing the blues, not us who are fortunate enough. My icebox is full of food, and I was looking at that saying, man, I'm a lucky cat.
Yeah,
My
man.
kids aren't sick. My ex isn't sick. My
Yeah.
sister's okay. My grandson's okay. And I'm doing what I love to do every day. And all my gigs and birthday thing being canceled, as Miles said in his 1959 classic record, so what?
Right. Hey, I want to play a little something, may I?
Please.
Let's see. My friend Dan suggested. How is that okay if I play something from your town performance? This is the Pasture of Plenty from there.
Oh yeah, that's where I was playing. I was playing the this one. I was playing the Hulu
Oh.
Symphony. This is before I wrote the symphony. Yeah.
So this it right here? This it says David Amram, Steve Earle.
Yeah, I was on a show with Steve, who's fantastic. I met him in Kerrville when we were still in high school from San Antonio, and he was like this brilliant kid.
Oh, so
That's the
this
one.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, so this is sound. So everybody, we're going to listen, not, it's not a view thing, but whoops, SoundCloud. Here we go. Uh,
Live from E-Town Hall in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, it's E-Town with this week's musical guests from New York City, New West recording artist Steve Earle, and from Beacon, New York, David Amram. I'm Helen Forster. Right now, please join me in welcoming our host, Nick Forster.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Helen. Welcome to E-Town Hall, our little solar-powered musical town hall gathering. This is going to be good. We have two musical guests this week who are more than just successful and prolific. They have really helped shape and define the world around them in ways even they couldn't possibly know. They chose different paths. One stayed in school, went in the Army, went to college, learned about classical music and composition and jazz, and became a collaborator who kind of defied labels and worked with about everybody. The other chose a troubled but powerful group of mentors and heroes, and chose a circuitous path through all kinds of hurdles and drugs and alcohol and every other way. But I just have to tell you, these two guys, between them, they could literally write the story of American cultural history for the last 80 years, and it would be good. It would be a good story. Up first, a guy who made the opposite of the sort of standard Western migration. He actually went from San Antonio to Austin and then Nashville and then New York over the last 45 years or so. And all along finding that balance between studying the masters, learning from mentors, while making his mark. He's a songwriter, playwright, actor, musician, author who is not fooling around. He's just released a new record of blues songs called Terraplane. Help me welcome back to E-Town, Steve Earle.
yeah,
Is this a radio broadcast?
sorry. Let me just, where do I stop? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that was Steve is great, but we played at the end.
Okay.
The one. Do you have the video of that?
You know, let me
Okay.
try and find
I sent
it.
it to.
Oh, is it in your, is it on your website?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go
You,
there.
you can look at it. It's called Pastors of Plenty.
Okay. Select YouTube videos and
Selected YouTube videos.
yeah, Pastures of Plenty.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. If you can go to the other part where it says selected YouTube videos.
That's what this page is.
No,
And-
no, right. See where I'm poking? It says selected YouTube. Okay, there. So okay, that one right there. Where if you could poke that one. And now, if you go down a little further, sorry.
God, there's so much. I'm going to be spending the day with you.
It's coming up. It's coming up. It's the part where I'm
I'm
saying.
going to spend the day with you, Dave.
No, you won't. Wait a second. It's right. Here we go. That's Kerouac. Crap. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Hold it. It was coming close now. Let me go down.
I mean, we could listen to something else too. We don't have to listen to that particular one. There's so much.
Okay, in that case. Oh, Steve. God damn it. Excuse. Oh, here we go.
Here,
See
right here.
where I am. Could you see where my thing is? It's a little lower.
Not this one with There Is a
No,
Mountain.
that's just a minute. original song. Here we go. What a Wonderful World. Here we go. Pastures of Plenty. See that?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay.
Here we go.
Cool.
That's it.
Okay.
You just let it run.
Yep.
It's got
Trying to make this picture
That's it.
bigger. Okay.
I met Nick in 1980, and I've listened to these broadcasts since the station started, as often as they can, because they have so much wonderful music. And finally to come here in this beautiful new building and be part of an evening like this evening, and to see not only music, but the things they do for the community, that woman getting that award for doing something so beautiful, that's a really wonderful thing for the whole society. It's just a joy to be here.
It's a mighty hard road, my poor hands of old. My poor feet have traveled on a hot, dusty road. Out of your dust bowl and westward we roll. And your deserts were hot, and your mountains were cold. I worked in your orchards of peaches and prunes. I slept on the ground in the light of the moon. On the edge of the city, you'll see us, and then we come with the dust and we go with the wind. California, Arizona, I harvest your crops. Well, it's north up to Oregon to gather your hops. Dig the beets from your ground, cut the grapes from your vine, to set on your table for your light, sparkling wine. green pastures of plenty from the dry desert ground. From the Grand Coulee Dam, where the waters run down. Every state in the Union must migrants have been. We'll work in this fight, and we'll fight till we win. It's always we ramble, that river and I, all along your green valleys. I will work till I die. My land I'll defend with my life if it need be. 'Cause my pastures are plenty, must always be free. My land I'll defend with my life, if it be. 'Cause my pastures are plenty, must always be free.
Wow. Fantastic. God, I love that.
Oh, well, thank you. That, and I did that. This was about a year before I took the wonderful song that I played earlier on your show for the symphony piece. That was a different one. And when I first did that a few years ago, I was playing at the jazz at Lincoln Center, and I thought with my jazz group I would put that in as one of the pieces, because I had taken Woody's words, which I had on the piano, always tried to get his words and not improvise every single word that he wrote. And his son Arlo said, no, he said, my dad, he used 3 or 4 different melodies a week. He didn't care as long as you got the words right. So I heard he and Nora were coming down, his sister, and they had commissioned me to write a whole symphony called This Land Symphonic Variations on a song by Woody Guthrie. I thought, uh-oh, if I play that version of Pastures of Plenty, maybe they'll ask for the score back and tear it up. And they heard it, and they liked it. They said, no, he said, that was so different from the way it's usually done. We like that. So I've been playing that a lot. And then because they're playing the Hulu Sai, I thought, I'm going to try and play something else. But that was a wonderful chance. And Nick, as I mentioned earlier, Foster and his group, we had never played together. I played with Nick last in 1980 at a festival of bluegrass on super pickers, and me playing the penny whistle as the person from outer space, because the French horn I left in the case. Everybody's playing too fast to do anything. Playing bluegrass and hot picking. Winfield Festival, it was called. It was terrific. They had a big sign up saying Picker's Paradise. And I played with a hotel room for him all night long, and we became friends after that. And they had never played that particular style for a long time. But, jazz can be anything as long as you follow Duke Ellington's motto, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And of course, Wynton, what he's done at Lincoln Center, he had so many different musicians, rock players and country. He did a record with Willie Nelson, all the beautiful musics. And of course, the jazz artists, Sonny Rollins made Way Out West, and Charlie Parker. Famous story was when he was in the Lower East Side, he disappeared. They said, where did he go? I said, oh, Bird must be out hocking his horn to get something. Sure enough, they scoured the neighborhood, and he was across the street sitting with the polka band, and he was so excited doing that he forgot he was supposed to be going back to work playing across the street. And it didn't mean that jazz musicians thought that they could do anything. They were interested in everything. That's the key. It doesn't mean you can do everything, but you can have an open mind and an open heart. And now we see symphony orchestras opening up their doors more or less, and schools opening up their doors more or less, and we're seeing that all things of beauty can be together. They're not all the
I
same.
I am seeing that. Yes, in the last 10 years, lots of different things are coming in. It's really beautiful to experience.
Oh yeah, well the record you made, I mean, boy, those players are fantastic players. I'm sure they were thrilled to do something that was real music.
Oh, thanks.
And
Yeah.
and the record she made thanked the members of the symphony in Nashville because they had some great string players, and I guess they must have been involved too.
Yeah, what was I going to say? Oh, do you, this is kind of jumping a little bit, but you must be friends with Sheila Jordan.
Oh sure,
Yeah.
she is incredible. We did a program at Jazz Mouth in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which unfortunately isn't there anymore. Portsmouth, New Hampshire is,
Right.
and the people are. And she came and we did a program, and I met her when I first came to New York. I knew her husband Duke before I went in the Army when he was playing with Stan Getz,
Yeah.
Washington D.C. And he introduced me to her, and she just had the baby that, and then she was already like a musician's and a singer, and now she's been here long enough to finally be acknowledged for her great gifts, and she's just wonderful. Her birthday is the day after mine,
Oh, really?
and
Oh,
I always love seeing her and hearing her. And she and Cameron Brown, when they play as a duo,
yeah.
that's like a going back
Gorgeous.
to school.
Yeah, yeah. They came out here and we made a concert for them in a friend's home venue, which is really nice. And it was so beautiful. Without actually saying it, to me, she basically was saying that I've been around, I've been there, and my job is to give it to you. That's what I got from watching her,
Right.
that particular night. And
Oh
the
yeah.
last song, I forget the last song. She knew exactly what, how to how to play the last song. I looked around the room, everybody was crying. It was really significant. Singer and a bass player. Yeah,
Oh yeah. She's amazing.
yeah,
We had such a good time because I've improvise lyrics and make up stuff on the spot so much, and we did that together, and we came out of an era where everybody did that.
yeah,
Before there was such a thing called rap or hip hop,
yeah, yeah.
and of course King Pleasure and those people were doing that, and the Mighty Sparrow, the great calypso singer, was doing that. And Homer made up the whole Iliad and the Odyssey out of his head. He was blind, so he didn't have a lawyer giving him cue cards of what to write, what to say. And he remembered all those great stories. And King David, or the songs of Solomon, were all done with a harp player, and Homer did it with a player who played the laptop guitar, the lira they called it in Greece. So music and poetry and spontaneous poetry are nothing new. And of course, that's what jazz has brought back to the awareness that you could have a classical, fundamental, scientific base and go from there into telling your story in your own way. And when you go around the world, they have what they call classical and folk music. Well, to us, it all sounds the same, but then you get with those musicians in Pakistan and India and China and all around Asia, just about everywhere. And like the Native Americans have their social songs and their sacred songs, and you can see there's different categories of music, some of which is done pretty much the same way, some of which is classical, and some of which is folk, a lot of which is done as a theme and variations. And that occurs everywhere. So when Sir Arnold Tovey wrote a book called The Lost Art of Improvisation in the 19th century, they had, for your viewers, what's called a fermata. That's like a bird's eye with a thing like that, and then a little dot in the middle. Looks like a bird's eye. That's the nickname for it. And when at that point in the concerto, the soloist had to make up something, summing up what the composer had written so far. And if they didn't do a good job doing that, they didn't get a gig again as a soloist with that group. So everybody had to improvise. Bach was a famous improviser where he would get 4 notes from the audience suggestion and make up a fugue on the spot look out, those of you that try to write a fugue, even if you spend a month trying to write 1 minute fugue, you'd never catch up to Bach. So the jazz artists kind of brought that back. And when Wynton Marsalis played with us, he said, "Can I make up my own cadenza for the Haydn?" I said, "Sure, Wynton, just let me, rather than the one that was in the book or books."
Yeah.
I said, "Just let me know when it's over so I can bring the orchestra back in and not mess it up." So each time he would give me a signal. The concertmaster was Harry Glickman, who played with Toscanini, and he was in his late 70s. He'd retired, but he played at the Brooklyn Academy because he was one of my mentors and an old friend, and he knew we'd have fun doing those concerts. So he came along as a concertmaster. He came up after the third performance. He said, "My God, David, that trumpet boy playing the trumpet is fantastic. What a genius." I said, "Isn't he wonderful?" He said, "And there's cadenzas. He's making up a different one each time." I said, "Well, Harry, that's what they call the lost art of improvisation." And Wynton was making up the cadenzas just as if it was out of a Haydn book. And in the 19th century, all the great players wrote their own cadenzas out. And then other players said, "Well, man, if that's what Franz Liszt wrote out as a cadenza, why should I try to, I'll just
yeah.
play his." So everybody plays the cadenzas that are already planned and written out. But the idea of improvising is to be on that high a level, to create something on the spot. So that's something that we could see and hear in a lot of the musics around the world. And now people are beginning to see that the formal and the spontaneous are different sides of the same coin, but they're not the same thing. And the idea of fusion was a thing given by the remaining people in the music business before it carried itself into oblivion. So they called it fusion. Well, music's fusion to begin with, chopsticks. That's playing that. You're playing two notes going in different directions. That's already fusion. Crossover, if you're in the land of beauty, when you take a bridge from Memphis across the Mississippi, it's still beautiful, but you're not going to a different planet. You're just taking a bridge across one part of the land of beauty to another. You're still in that land of beauty. So there's nothing to cross over to because you're already there. And music itself is fusion if you have more than one person playing. So therefore, though, that idea of demeaning or diminishing spontaneous and creative ways of combining things like you do when you're cooking good food is not to make one big slop, gruel, melting pot of swill, but rather to take different beautiful things and honor them. And you can also do that by doing a program where you do each piece. If you do Mozart and Thelonious Monk's piece, I've done that quite often, you don't try to make them the same thing or have to have it be a pop schlock concert. It could be great music played in the style of that particular composer's or musician's work. And that's something that they used to do a lot in symphonies in the old days, where they would have different composers, and people in the older days didn't have the high-tech stuff that we do now, but they did have the idea of playing in a style or styles. There was a German way and a French way and a Russian way and an English way of playing the violin and the oboe and those different instruments. And also you could tell who the soloists were. Each person had their own voice within that language. And the same thing is true in jazz, and the same thing is true in every form of art and music. So I think we're beginning to return to that idea now that everyone can get all the books and study everything like a real estate tax lawyer. We could say, hey, there's something more than that. It's the way it's done, the phrasing, the feeling, the storytelling, all of that stuff. So that's something the older people can pass on of what we learned from our elders. You're not just supposed to hit the right notes. You're supposed to tell that story and find a way to express something.
Yeah. I have a question from Scott Whitfield. He wanted to ask you about your triple concerto.
Good. Well, Todd, you got my ESP message because I was going to ask Cathy. if she could play that for my going out. That's a
Oh,
classical piece that I
cool.
wrote for
Fantastic.
woodwind, brass, and jazz quintet, and to encourage all your readers, listeners, or viewers, excuse me, and fans. This again came about as a fluke where I was asked by the American Symphony Orchestra, Leopold Stokowski was the director, to have my jazz group come and play Christmas carols with with the orchestra while the audience was singing and play, Oobop Scott Boodly de Vam Voody Vouty around it. I said, well, look, no offense, if you're going to spend all that money and commission me to write a piece, I think we can do better than that. I had the nerve to say that. This was 1970. It got premiered in 71. The woman said, really? And I said, yeah, why don't we write something, a triple concerto, but instead of violin, cello, piano, have a woodwind quintet drawn from those great woodwind players in your symphony who can play their cans off and nobody ever sees them, have them be featured, a brass quintet from your orchestra, a jazz quintet with Pepper Adams, Jerry Dodgian, Al Harewood, and Herb Bushler, who I was working with, who could play anything and everything, and a full orchestra. She said, well, what? And I said, we could do it if you'll do it, and it'll really add to the repertoire and show that these are three great groups of musicians, each one like a concerto grosso, and you can have some music that would be substantial, and it'll be something that'll get played again, which it has been hundreds of times. So begrudgingly, they said, okay. And I have the last movement. It's on my YouTube site, #1. You can pick it right up off what we did before.
Yeah.
We talked. And it's called, and it's members of the Chicago Symphony, and we did it on a program called Soundstage. And we did the one movement, members of the Chicago Symphony. And earlier, Dizzy Gillespie had played with me, Steve Goodman, the great singer, and a wonderful Latin artist from Típica 63, of a whole program of different kinds of musics that I was blessed to be part of. And I was conducting and also playing the Pakistani flute. And you can see the great Pepper Adams and Jerry Dodgian playing little solos, and the rest of it, except for part of it, was all, every note was written out so that the Chicago Symphony players actually could read it off the paper. And at first they were looking at it, and you could see as it goes along, all these great players, suddenly they're getting into it. By the end, it sounded like the orchestra of Beirut and a big band. And it was done in 1977. So if you see a young guy with black hair playing the penny whistle, that was me a long time ago. But I'm still at it. And the piece still gets played. And now they can play it without me, which is great. And one
Oops, he froze.
So this is for you and for everyone else, and for all. And Cathy, I thank you, and for all you to be creative, whether they're learning how to jump rope, dance, playing a mural on the sidewalk, or want to play music or do anything, or play sports, and anything to get out of the house and be with other people and do something. It's not a waste of time. It's a character builder. And they'll be a better doctor, lawyer, parent, and citizen. And so will all the grown-ups who, if they could do anything in the arts with and for other people, it's not a waste of time or self-indulgence. It's a character builder and contributes something beautiful to the world, and we sure need it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you spending this time. It's really very generous of you, and I appreciate it. And I want to talk to you more. I want to check in with you every now and then and go, hi, David.
Yeah, I want to hear. I'm going to watch your show, and I want to hear some of the other musicians and more of your stuff too.
Thank you. So I'll play. It's the one with the Chicago Symphony, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll play that out, and thank you again and again and again. You've just been so lovely to hang out with, and so full of inspiration, and talking from a really beautiful space. And I'm sure everybody has totally dug this hang.
Oh, well, I thank you, and I'm going to see if I can follow my own advice. That's the hard part. I don't walk that you talk, but I'm trying. Bless you for all you're doing for having a program like this. It's pretty remarkable.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, you and I will speak again, and I'm going to play, and you can either stay or leave, whatever you'd like to do. And thank you again.
I thank you.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my screen, and voila. Here we go. And
It's
let's
right
see.
on my, you go right on my website.
Yeah, right here. Here it is.
That's it.
God, that's incredible.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Wow, that had so many beautiful things about it. Uh, and after speaking with you, it just makes it so much more understandable what you the concepts of what you brought to that. It's just really quite beautiful.
Thank you. It was great to, and of course, the all three movements you could, or I guess you could still get from the original. Second movement was a long, based on the blues, and the first movement was just kind of based on all the wonderful music and jazz that I was blessed to be part of. And I think, my hope is that it can encourage. This was done originally in 1971. People said you were ahead of your time by film scores done in the 50s and 60s. Those are all out now. Splendid the Grass came out 60 years as a soundtrack album after. People said you were ahead of your time. I said, no, no one's ahead of their time. They're right on time. And Charlie Parker said, now's the time. And essentially, that's what we deal with every day. So a thing of beauty is a joy forever. So one of the things is for anybody that's doing anything, you have to be patient. And if you're told no or ignored, that's part of the whole picture and just keep on trucking. And eventually, hopefully, someone will appreciate it. And when they do, you say thank you. And if it's 50 years later and the same people that say, you are marvelous, really thought you sucked at the time, you thank them so you leave the door open for the next person not to have to wait that long. So goodbye, everybody, and I hope our paths cross again. And if you have any relatives turning 90, be kind to them. And for those of you who are turning 90, hang out with your kids, grandkids, and great grandkids and explain to them that we need them more than they need us. And we can all, by getting together, educate one another. Hi there. The, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, but the timing was perfect because we were just saying goodbye and the thank you and all that stuff. Listen, Cathy, that was fun. Thank you so much. What a wonderful program. Oh, it's my treat, and I hope that for your listeners too, some of them will get encouraged to, because everybody wants to do something, and we're all told, to go shove